Hey, good morning. Sorry I'm a little late. We are on the top of Pei Gimel Amud Beis of 83b, finishing up a discussion of when you buy three trees. So if you buy three trees, you acquire the land under it, and we pointed out that the trees are have to be a certain distance apart from each other. And now we're going to discuss that, and the idea being that when you buy three trees, you really bought a field of trees. You didn't just buy three individual trees. And therefore, since you bought like a field of trees, therefore you acquire the land under it. So, Bayi Rav Ashi is going to ask the following question: Bor mahu shetafsik amas mayim. Let's say you have a pit that's in the middle of the trees, and does that split up your three trees? What about an amas mayim, a whole channel of water that's going through the trees? Does that split up the trees? Rishus Rabin Mahu. What if you have a public thoroughfare in between two trees? Does that split it up? Richva Didikli. If you have a lot of grafted trees, so it's also similar to something that's interrupting the two trees. Mahu. Does that count as a interruption? Meaning, even though the distance between the trees is the right distance between 4 and 16 amos. But when you have these things so glaringly in the middle, yeah, Rikhva de Dikla is a hedge of palms. Okay. So some kind of thing that's stopping in the middle of two trees, or meaning two out of your three trees, there's something in the middle there. So all these things, even though you have the requisite amount of distance between one tree to another tree, however, you don't view this maybe as a field of trees because a usual field of trees doesn't have a public thoroughfare going straight through. So on that, the Gemara says Teku. I don't know. I don't know. Bo mine Hillel may Rebbe. Okay, Hill asked Rebbe, let's say you sold the trees, and now Allah Erez Beinehen. The Gemara thinks now that this cedar tree grew in between two of your trees after you've already purchased it. Mahu. Says the Gemara, what do you mean? Allah Birshusatideh. No, you bought the land already. So if a cedar tree grew in the land that you bought, so then that's fine. That's your cedar tree. Ella Haya Erez Beinehen Mahu. That's what we're asking. There was already when you sold it a big cedar tree in the middle. So maybe that cedar tree should also be considered a hefsek. It should be a separation between your trees. Therefore, you would not get the land under it. Amarle kana v'kana. No, he says you've acquired the trees in the land and you've acquired the cedar tree, and that's in between the two trees also. Meaning, we know that you acquire everything in between. We had earlier, you acquire the land under, the land in between, and the land right around it. So, did that mean regular land to exclude things like a cedar tree, or does that even include a cedar tree? So says the Gemara, yeah, even a cedar tree, as big as it is, and as unique as it is, and as important as it is, it's still acquired. Okay, these three trees, how were they positioned? Were they positioned in a row, or were they positioned a little bit like we're sitting, sort of like a triangle, right? So what would be the difference between a triangle and a row? So if you have a triangle, there's no room to plant anything in the middle, right? 1, 2, and 3. So it's surrounded on all the sides. No one's going to plant stuff in the middle. If you have a row of trees, 1 tree, 2 tree, 3 tree, that might lead to the ability to plant in the middle. So let's see. Ketzad Hein Omdin. How are these 3 trees standing? Rav Amar Kit Shura. Rav said they were like a row. Shmuel Amar Kechatzuva. It was more like a triangle. So now, Mand Amar Kishura, if even 3 trees that are in a row are going to be, is good enough, and that's going to be sold to you, so then for sure if the three trees are in a triangle, that's for sure going to be sold to you. I mean, that's no problem. The fact that they're in a row, we're going to see in a second, is a reason why you should not acquire the land under them. And yet, if you acquire the three trees in a row, for sure you should acquire the three trees in a triangle. Uman de Omar Kichatzuva, Aval Kishura Lo. Why not? If you acquire them in a triangle, but maybe if they were just in a row, that would not be, you would not acquire the land under it. That wouldn't be considered, a field of trees. So why not? My time, Mishum de Mizdara Bein Tayu. Because in between the trees, there's room there to plant, to seed. Therefore, it could be that maybe, I guess, when a seller wants to sell you that, so since there's room there to seed, maybe, I guess, either we don't consider it like really a field of trees because there's too much room there that even, the seller would want to plant different things. Right? Why else would it not be sold if it's in a row? Yeah, exactly. Such a thing the seller would retain for himself because he wants to use it to plant stuff. So even though it's three trees in a row, but a regular seller might not want to give you that because that's a nice amount of land. If you know that three trees come with the land, so if they're in a row, 1 tree, 2 tree, 3 tree, let's say each tree is 10 amos away from each other. That's a lot of land being sold that the seller can use to cultivate. But if the three trees are in a triangle, so then such a case that would be sold to you. So it's a machlokas how they are shaped, the three trees, and the difference is going to be that if you hold that a triangle formation, you get the land under it. You might not agree that a line formation would be sold. So yeah, okay. Maskif Rav Hamnuna. Okay, so Rav Hamnuna has a kasha. Ulamanda Amar Kichatzuva. So 1 second. According to the one that has three trees in a triangle formation, Mai Taima Delom is Tayu. Why is it so obvious to you that just because you have three trees in a triangle, but the trees are distant from each other, they're between 4 and 16 amos away from each other. So that land is also easily cultivated. So if once a seller is going to keep land for himself to cultivate, what's the difference if the land is between trees that are in a row or the land is between trees in a triangle? Either way, there's land there that might be cultivated. So maybe the seller wants to keep it for himself. So on that question, says the Gemara, Elameata, if that would be true, Zavin lei flat hegi romaisa delo mizdara beintayu hachanami diyeshlo karka. So he says, if you're going to tell me that three trees that are in a triangle formation, the guy is going to want to use that land to cultivate. So maybe even 3 thorn bushes that are going to be sold, which we don't cultivate that area. So maybe also there's going to be no land that's going to come with these. Then there will be land that will come with these thorn bushes. Once again, what's the question? Rav Hamnuna said, what's the reason why you can't cultivate between this triangle? So and then he compares a triangle formation of trees to thorn bushes, which nobody cultivates. And since nobody cultivates them, then you should also get the land under them. Meaning, if you're going to tell me now that there are 3 trees in a triangle formation, and for some reason the land is not used to cultivate, and therefore you acquire the land under the trees, so if you have 3 thorn bushes, that's also not used to cultivate that area where the thorn bushes grow. So you should also acquire the land under the thorn bushes. Any area that's not used to cultivate should have land come with the trees. So, but apparently we know that that's not true. So he's asking why not. So Amar no. Hanach lo chashivi, hanach chashivi. These thorn bushes, they're not really considered significant. They're not really significant. Says the Rashbam, you need two things. You need significant trees, and you need that it's not an area that's going to be cultivated. So if you have trees which are significant, as opposed to thorn bushes that just grow thorns, are not significant, and you need an area that's not going to be cultivated. So therefore, when you have three trees that are in a triangle formation, trees are significant. The area of the land is not going to be cultivated. So in that case, you receive the land under the trees. But three thorn bushes, even though you don't cultivate the area next to the thorn bushes, you don't work, the seller doesn't work the land over there, because I guess it's not really fitting for, good production. And, how do I know? Because they produce thorns. Exactly.
Yeah, the animals versus thorn bush.
Oh, that's interesting. Is that why?
One of the things is
that makes sense. Maybe animals will okay, yeah, good. Right. The question is the why, but we never explained why, if you have three trees in a triangle, is that area of land not fit for cultivating? That was just taken as an obvious assumption.
Maybe with big enough trees is actually too much shade cover.
Mm-hmm. The trees have too much shade. That's interesting. He says it's more difficult to cultivate the land between trees arranged in a triangle than those in a straight line. It's hard to plow that area. So I guess we're looking right now at the difficulty of the plowing. That's why by a thorn bush, it's also very difficult to plow, because there's thorns there. If you have to always go around, in a zigzag around the trees, that's also difficult. Okay, fine. Okay, here we go. New Mishnah. Continuing the sale of numerous items. This one's interesting. This probably happens to you, Jules, all the time. Hamocher rosh behema, when you're selling the head of an animal, a big animal, lo macher saraglaim. You only mean to sell the head, not the feet, right? So macher saraglaim, but if you're selling the feet of the animal, the legs of the animal, lo macher esarosh, then you're not selling the head of the animal. That's right. Macher esakana. So if you're selling here, it's referring to the lungs. It usually means the windpipe. Here it's referring to the lungs of the animal. Lo macher es hakaved. You have not sold the liver of the animal. The liver of the animal. Macher es hakana lo macher es hakaved. Macher es hakaved lo macher es hakana. This is all by a big animal. A behema gasa. Aval bedaka, by a thin animal. Macher es harosh. Macher es haraglaim. There, if you sell the head of the animal, you've also sold the legs of the animal. Yeah. Machar saraglaim machar sarosh. However, when you sell the head, everything comes along with it. Machar saraglaim, if you're only selling the legs of the animal, so then lo machar sarosh. Then you do not sell the head of the animal. Machar esakana, machar esakaved, machar esakaved, lo machar esakana. If you sell the lungs, you've sold the liver. But if you sold the liver, you have not sold the lungs. The Rashbam points out this is only in a case where there is no minhag, there's no custom how things are sold. But if you're in a place that there's certain ways things are sold, heads come with legs, livers come with lungs, so then you do as the minhag of that town is. Hopefully we will get back to these cases. Well, let's see. Yeah. Okay. So it would seem like by a big animal, everything's very compartmentalized. Each item is its own unit. Versus by a thinner animal, it's easier that when a person buys something, he buys more things with it.
What they say is it's more significant in a big animal.
So in a big animal,
the liver is significant in a big animal, but it's not significant in a small animal.
Small animal, but even in a small animal, some things are more significant. I guess, like a like a liver. You haven't sold the lungs
because the liver is relatively insignificant. So if you're selling the liver, you're selling shtickle salmon. But if you're selling the lungs, who cares about the liver? Throw the liver in. It's kind of a.
Mm-hmm.
It's an add-on. It's not a. I mean, it's a. What am I going to do with a liver anyway? So give it to the guy with the liver.
You're asking me. I don't know. It's up to you. Ask you right now. Yeah, right. A liver. You're right. A liver is more insignificant. And here's going to come the more where the long rush bombs come in. Okay, so arba midos b'mochrin, 4 different types of sales. We're gonna have 4 kinds of sales now, and we're going to a long discussion about this. Arba midos b'mochrin. There are literally 4 traits with sellers, meaning 4 kinds of ways to sell things. Macher lo chitin yafos. You sell good wheat. Chitin are wheat, yafos are good wheat. And what happens? V'nimtzu ra'os. So you sold what you thought was good quality wheat. The buyer thought he was buying good quality wheat. Then he comes home, opens the package, turns out it's bad quality wheat. What's the halacha? Halokeach yachol lakser bo. The lokeach is allowed to go back on the whole thing. Lakser means he can go and return the item. Now, that's the first midah. That's the first kind of sale. Ra'os, let's say you're selling bad wheat. You think it's like lower quality wheat. V'nimtzu yafos. The guy buys it and then it comes out, it's high quality wheat. Now what happens? Mocher yachol lakser bo. So the seller is allowed to retract. What we call a mekach. You go to buy a Toyota, the guy sells you a Honda, whatever it is, it's a different thing than you got. So if you wanted high quality and you got low quality, you got high quality. So then the person who lost out is able to retract. Ra'os v'nimtzu ra'os, yafos v'nimtzu yafos. Okay, the usual case. You bought what you paid for. There was bad wheat and you got bad wheat, or good wheat and you got good wheat. So then obviously ein echad mehem yachol lakser bo. So then no one could retract. Okay. Yeah. Shechamasis v'nimtzeis levana. There's apparently only 2 kinds of colored wheat, red and white. So you sold red wheat and it came out to be white wheat, or levana v'nimtzeis shechamasis and it came out to be red wheat, or eitim shel zayis v'nimtzeis shel shikma. You bought branches of olive branches and it came out to be sycamore branches, or shel shikma v'nimtzeis shel zayis, or of a sycamore and it came out to be olive branches. Yain v'nimtza chometz. You had wine, it came out to be vinegar. Chometz v'nimtza yain, or you thought you were buying vinegar and it came out that it's wine. So in those cases, shneihem yichol lakser ben. That's a totally different item. Both parties are able to retract. Yeah. Okay. So now, there's a halacha called ona, where a person pays more or less for the item that they're buying. That's one. So now there's the Mishnah Bava Batra talks about the number called a shtus. A shtus is a sixth. So the Mishnah there, it's going to be relevant because Rav Chis is going to go with that Mishnah. Rav Chis is going to say the following: that basically, if you sell something and you're off by a sixth, so now there's 2 cases that you could be off by a sixth. Let's say you sell an item that's worth $5, but you charge $6 for it, right? So you overcharged by a sixth. Let's say it was worth $6, the item, but the guy paid $5, right? So you undervalue the item by $1. Either the item is off by a sixth, or financially you paid more than a sixth, right? So according to Rav Chisda, the person who lost out can do one of 2 options. He can either say, it's a mechach, we're done with this sale, give me back my item. So, let's say the seller sold something to the buyer. However, the buyer got gypped. It was instead of $5, it was $6. So now the buyer has an option. Either give me back, I'll give you back the item and you give me back all the money. Or Rav Chisda says, the buyer could say, just give me back the extra $1. If I gave you $6 for a $5 item, I have 2 options. Let's just cancel the whole thing, or give me back that $1. That is Rav Chisda's halacha. Rav Chisda is going like a Mishnah in Bava Mציעא, according to Shmuel's interpretation of that Mishnah, and all of that is not how we hold the halacha by Ono. We hold differently. But okay, so Amar of Chisda, Macher lo shave chamesh b'sheish. The seller, so Reuben's a seller, he sells something that's worth 5 b'sheish, right? So now what happens? If you would stop the story right there, according to Rav Chisda, the buyer has two options. He sold the item for $6. He overcharged. So the buyer is the one that lost out. So the buyer has one of two options. Either let's cancel and I'll get my $6 back, or let's keep it and just give me my $1 back, the one that was overcharged. Mm-hmm. But now what happened? The $5 item was the hooker v'amid al shmona. It went up in price to $8. So the item's worth 5. This is fun, right? The item's worth 5. It's just not fun at 11:30 at night, but it's fun. So the buyer sells it at $5. The seller sells it at $5. The buyer he paid $6 for it. He's losing out. Now the item went up to $8. So now who won? The buyer wins. The buyer came out. The buyer actually underpaid for an $8 item. So now what would be the halacha? So if you would stop at the first stage, so then of course the buyer is the underdog. He's the one who gets to decide what to do, right? Or do you say now, but now that the seller is the underdog, right? The seller lost out over here. He only received $6 for $8 item. So maybe the seller could say, either cancel the deal or you owe me $2 more. So says the Gemara, Minis Ana, who's the one that lost out? Is it the Lokeach or the Mocher? Says the Gemara, Lokeach. We go after the original payment. We don't care that it went up in price, and now it's the seller who lost out. We look at the original sale, and since it was worth 5, and the guy charged 6, the Lokeach is the one that lost out. Therefore, Lokeach Yachol Achsero. A Lokeach is able to retract in one of two ways: either cancel the deal or get back his dollar. V'lo mocher. Why? Next page. Mishum de Amar le ilu lo onisan. Meaning, if you would have never overcharged me, if you'd have just charged me $5 for a $5 item, so then lo havi matzis hadartabach, then there'd be nothing doing, right? If you would have charged $5 for a $5 item, and it happened to go up now to $8, right? You can't come and claim you stole me $3. So hasha de onisan. Now that you originally overcharged me, now you want to retract. Meaning you go to a store and you buy a regular item. You walk into Fred Meyer, you walk into Safeway, and you buy a bottle of wine, $10.99, $20, whatever it was.
Where are you buying wine?
Where are you buying wine from? Okay, $49.99 for a bottle of wine, right? And now it turns out that this wine goes up, to $100 now. So Safeway can't come to you and say, you owe me $50, right? So that's what he's saying. The buyer telling the seller. So just because now you overcharged me, so let's say it really cost $30, and Safeway, the guy got you behind the counter. Oh yeah, this bottle actually went up to $49.99, even though the price says $30. And for some reason, I guess you believed him. I don't know. So now that you got overcharged, you can retract the sale? Of course not. Hasha de onisan matzis hajisbach. Obviously not. Okay. So now, once again, Rav Chisda is a case where if you get overcharged and the buyer loses out, the buyer can retract on the sale. Even in the event that the item goes up in price and it looks like the seller is the one that's at loss, however, the buyer is still able to retract. Why are we bringing Rav Chisda over here? We're about to say that there are a few cases in our Mishnah that are so obvious, there are no need to be stated, they must be coming to tell you the Chiddush of Rav Chisda. So meaning, when a Mishnah tells you obvious cases, like if you sold good wheat and now the wheat's bad, it comes out it was bad, the buyer can retract on that, that's going to be obvious. So the implication is that the Mishnah is teaching you a novelty. The fact that you thought you were buying good wheat and you ended up buying bad wheat, there's no novelty in that. Of course you could retract. You open up the package and it's rotten. It must be a case where it was really cost 5, you paid 6, went up to 8, and that's what the Mishnah says the buyer could retract. And the other way, let's say The second case where the guy sold you bad wheat ended up being good wheat. So now the seller is at a loss. He thought he was telling you his lowest quality wheat. Turns out it was actually his best quality wheat. So that's obvious. There was a mistake that was made. The seller could say, listen, there was a mistake. I want to retract. That case is obvious. Of course he could retract. It was a total mistake in sale. It must be for a case where the seller first sold something that he was under, it was, the item cost $6 and the seller only sold it for $5. Now, so the seller's at a loss. Now the item goes up to $8 and the item goes down to $3. It goes down to $3 and now the buyer's at a loss because the buyer paid once again, item costs $5, costs $6. The buyer pays $5. The seller's at a loss. He got $1 less than what he deserves. But now what happened? The item went down to $3. If it's down to $3 now, so now the buyer ended up paying $5 for a $3 item. So that the buyer says, hey, I'm at a loss. So we're going to say that those two cases of the Mishnah of good wheat and bad wheat, and then it switches, so is really so obvious that it must be teaching us the novelty of Rav Chisda. That's going to be said. Okay. Shoot. Yeah. Okay. Vitana Tuna, our Mishnah is teaching, our Mishnah taught Yafos Vinim Tzuros. You sell good wheat. Turns out it was low quality wheat. It was very bad wheat. Halacha is Lokeach Yachol Laxerbo, below Mocher. Only the buyer, could retract, and not the seller. The Amar of Chisda, Machar le Shave Sheish Bechamesh Vehuzlu, the Amdu al Shlosha. Okay, so one sec. So, sorry, Vitana Tuna, our Mishnah is teaching us the case of Rav Chisda. This case where you sell good wheat and then ends up being bad wheat, that's going to be the case of Rav Chisda, where you sold something for like we just had. You sold it for $5, and then went up to you sold it for you sold it for $5, it went up to $6, and then went up to $8. That's going to be the case of our Mishnah. Now, Rav Chisda's other case, the Amar Rav Chisda, let's say the inverse case. Machar lo shaveh shisha b'chamish. You have a $6 valued object that you ended up selling for $5. So, by the way, back then, you sell something, and then all of a sudden the guy goes, and then you take it to the marketplace, and you see how much it's really worth. Right? Not necessarily that everyone knows how much things are worth between two people. You have to take it to the marketplace and see how much is that being sold. Mm-hmm. So the guy ends up having it was worth $6. He didn't know. He estimated. Okay, I think it's worth $5. So and then it ends up really it was $6. It was $6. So he was underpaid $1. The huzlu, the amdu al shlosha. Now it went down to $3. It was now only worth $3. So originally it was $6. The guy got underpaid. He's really owed $1. So, and now it went down to $3. So originally the buyer was the one losing out. He was underpaid. But now it turns out the seller was underpaid. But the buyer has now overpaid $2 for a $3 item. He paid $5. It only cost $3. Minus Anna, who's at loss? Mocher. You go after what happened at the time of the sale. Mocher yachol laxero. Since originally it cost $6 and the seller only received $5, even though it went down to $3, that doesn't matter. You look at what happened at the time of the sale, and therefore, if the seller comes now and says, originally I was underpaid $1, he's able to retract the sale, or he's able to get his money's worth. He's able to get $1 from the buyer. Why? The Amar Lehe, same thing. Ilu lo onisan lo have matzah. If I never would have undercharged, if you never would have underpaid less than what it cost, if you would have paid exactly what it cost, so if it was $6 and you paid $6 for it, and it happened to go down in price, the market crashed, right? So you can't take all your items that you one time bought and after the market crash, bring your bucket list to the store and say, you owe me money now.
It's a great way to redeem your
yeah, that's a great, right? It's a great, yeah, it's much better than coupons.
To redeem your losing stocks.
Right, exactly. Yeah, that's a good example. Exactly. you buy a stock, right? You pay $1,000 for a stock, and now the market crashes, and your stock's worth $5. So you can come and say, hey, so right, you can't do that. So lo mazhavi hashta matzah. So now that you happen to underpay, and now it goes down, you want to retract? No way. Vitana tuna. That's the case of our Mishnah. Ra'os v'nimtzu yafos. You have bad wheat that ended up being good wheat. Mocher yachol lachzerbo. The seller can actually retract the lo lokeach and not the buyer. So now we say, my kamashlan masnisin. What is our Mishnah? What's the chiddush of our Mishnah? My kamashlan masnisin he. Oh, one sec. So that ends up being the case of our Mishnah. Okay, so now we're saying we're flipping it. It's so obvious. It's so obvious that the case of the Mishnah has to be Rav Chisda's cases, because just to say good wheat and then bad wheat and then good wheat, the person can retract. That's way too obvious. We can't fathom how that could be the novelty of the Mishnah. So the only other option we have is it must be referring to this case of Rav Chisda. So now we're saying that's so obvious that that's our Mishnah. What's the novelty of Rav Chisda? Rav Chisda was a later Amora. He came later. Rav Chisda, it's so obvious that this is the case of our Mishnah that we don't even understand now what is the chiddush of Rav Chisda. So now we're going to find a certain novelty in our Mishnah, to which we're going to say that's why you need a Rav Chisda's case. So my kamashlan, but don't worry, the two dots is in sight. Yeah. So my kamashlan masnisin. My kamashlan masnisin he. So says the Gemara, no. Okay. Ime masnisin. If you would have learned our Mishnah, what would you have thought? Hava mina dilma dirav Chisda travayu matzu hadribahu. Umasnisin ha'asalash ma'inan dilokeach yachol lachzerbo. It's probably Jared, right? So, oh no, it's already 6. What day is today? Wednesday. Oh, we have time. Okay. Even masnisin have amina dilma de Rav Chisda. If you would have learned from our Mishnah, so you would have thought that the case of Rav Chisda, really both parties could retract, and our Mishnah is teaching you that only the lokeach could retract. So meaning the case of our Mishnah is, so if you had only had our Mishnah, so you would have thought that in the case of Rav Chisda, where the food went up from 5 to 6 and then to 8, or it went down, it was from 6 to 5 down to 3, both parties, not only the seller, but also the buyer, not only the buyer, but also the seller, they could both retract. Kamash Malan, you learn from our Mishnah, it's not true. Only the buyer could retract. So let's see why. The Salkadaita Chamina Mishum Diksiv Rara Yomer Hakona. So let's give the case. Let's say our first case. Our first case is our first case. Our first. What is that? You
should have just told him to quiet.
Yeah. I like them. I don't know. So the first case is where you sold good wheat, right? Where you sold good wheat and it came out to be bad wheat. And the case is that what? The case is that really it originally it was 5 and you got overpaid 6. So the buyer overcharged. But now it went up to 8. So the buyer really underpaid. So you would have thought maybe in that case, both parties could retract, meaning the buyer could retract or the seller could retract. Kamash Malan, this pasuk teaches us Ra Yomer Hakona, which basically means that a buyer is always looking to get the best deal on things. The buyer is always looking to figure out a way to pay the least amount for his product. So since that's true, since that's going to be true, so therefore we really assume we only let the buyer retract. We don't let the seller retract. We just let the buyer. Originally, he always wants the least amount for his deal, and ends up being it costs 5. He overpaid 6. So since a buyer always wants to try to get the better deal, so really he's the one that's at loss, not the seller. And I guess it'll go the other way too. In the case where the seller got underpaid, the seller always wants the best for his deal, right? Tov for the seller. Mm-hmm. So therefore, since he got underpaid, only he's able to retract. We don't let both parties retract. Yeah. Okay. There's like a 3-way argument exactly what the novelty is, but we'll leave it at that. You would have thought that maybe both parties could retract, and the answer is that no, only the buyer could retract, or only the seller could retract, and that's why you needed our Mishnah, because if you only had Rav Chisda, you would have thought that maybe both parties could retract in this situation, and our Mishnah says that only one of them could actually retract. Right. They just point out here that, let's say in the case that right, the case where the wheat was good wheat ended up being bad wheat, so yeah, okay, whatever, yeah, fine. So
ultimately, it doesn't matter what happens after the
correct. Right, essentially here in the arsenal, they don't quote the Rashbam. The Rashbam has 2 explanations of what the novelty is. I guess it was too complicated. So they quote Tosafos' interpretation of the Gemara, which is not their usual way, but they say that since a buyer always wants to get the least amount, always get a lower price, so when you had good wheat, so the seller can say that his representation of the wheat as superior was never to be taken seriously by the buyer, because he knew all along that such talk was simply just a seller's way of speaking. Meaning a buyer always wants the cheapest, so the buyer's telling him, the seller's saying, this is really good wheat. The buyer never took him seriously. And therefore, when it ended up being low quality wheat, so the seller could say, since the buyer never took it seriously, maybe I should be able to retract. Kamashwan, that no. That no, even though the buyer always wants his tries to get the lower price for his product, however, he's still allowed to retract. At the end of the day, it was good wheat. It was it was 5, and the guy paid 6, so he's allowed to retract and get his money back. Okay, next part's much easier. Shechamasis v'nimtzes levana. So you had red wheat and ended up being white wheat, or white wheat ended up being red wheat. The assumption is there are only 2 colors of wheat, and this word shechamasis, apparently we're not exactly sure. We're not actually sure what it is, but since there's only 2 kinds of wheat, red and white, says the Gemara, Amar Papa midikatani levana, from the fact that the other one is considered white. So what's going to happen? Shmamina, that hayi shimsha is sumkasihi. The word, it comes from the word chama. Chama means the sun. It says, Rav Papa, interesting statement. From here I know that the sun is red. Yeah, interesting. Since we call this wheat the same name as we call the sun, and there's only 2 colors of wheat, white and red, must be, you learn from here that the sun is red. So Teda, look out, I'll prove to you. Look outside. The kasam katsafra upanya, when the sun rises and the sun sets, it's red. So if it's so red, why don't you see it throughout the day? Only during sunrise and sunset. V'hai deloka chazinan kula yoma, because nehorenu, it's just way too bright. You can't see its redness. It's too bright. But in sunrise and sunset, where it's less, the day is less bright, there you could see the redness of the sun. Kula yoma nehorenu delobari. It's not clear. It's just too bright. The redness isn't as clear. Okay. So Tosfos points out in an interesting thing, it matters to us exactly what color the sun is. Not orangish, not yellowish, red. Why? If you make a nether, you make a vow, and prohibit yourself from all red things. So sunlight would be included in that. So you can't keep it vague. The sun is like orangish, reddish, yellowish sometimes. They're not going to work. Now that we know that it's red, if you get, really angry or, so then you say, I'm never getting any benefit from red. You hate red. Yeah. So now you're stuck. Now you can't really go outside and get benefit from the sun. So, so that's interesting.
Bad move.
Yeah. So Meseh. So this is by the case of Taras. The person gets Taras. The colors are white. Umareyu, the Taras, the I don't like the word leprosy, but this disease on your skin is amok mina or. It's deeper. It looks deeper than your skin. It's just like kemarechama amuka minetzel. It's just like the sun. You see it. It's deeper than the shade. I mean, the way you see the sun, you can see that it's amuka minetzel. I translate its appearance is deeper than the shade. So why are we comparing white tzaras to a sun? A sun is red. Says so. Sounds like you can't say the sun is red. Sounds like the sun is not red. Says the Gemara, no. What it means is kim marechama demuko. Just a loose comparison. The same way this on your skin the appearance is deeper than your skin. So too the sun, which is red, the appearance is much deeper than the shadow. Okay. Yeah, kamar chama demuko itself. V'lo kamar chama. V'lo kamar chama. The ilu hasam lavan v'haka adom. There it's white and here it's red. Ulamai dislog daitan can make kara haka sam katzafra upanya betzafra. Dechalfa avi vardan degan edem upanya dechalfa pisklik deganim. We'll continue from this and translate it tomorrow. Okay.